Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to CIWEM's BeFloodReady webinar on different approaches to deliver property flood resilience. I'm Paul Sheffer. I am the project manager for the community of practice, and just want to say welcome to the event. And I'll just run through a little bit of housekeeping. So the webinar is going to be recorded, and we hope to share that video on the CIWEM YouTube channel within the next couple of weeks. Once we've got permissions from everybody, but I think everybody's fairly content with that being shared. If you experience any technical issues and need any help, please use the chat feature. And my colleague Barbara, who you may hear later on, will help you with those queries. Please do use the Q&A function though. So we've got two Q&A sessions. We've got one after the first group of presentations that talk about Build Where Better, and then we've got one at the end where all the speakers will contribute. And within that Q&A function, you've got the ability to vote for other questions that you think are relevant and useful. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Martin Lennon from BeFloodReady, who is the chair of the afternoon. So over to you, Martin.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for organising. Firstly, can I just say I'm absolutely delighted to have so many people join us this afternoon and giving up their sunny Friday afternoons to talk about PFR. I'm really bowled over by the level of interest in this, and I think it shows testament both to what CIWEM are creating here with the BeFloodReady community of practice and the kind of wider interest in PFR. We at BeFloodReady are really committed to the value of PFR and its potential, and we think that the role of PFR is only going to get more important into the future. And I think that's because of the nature of flood risk that we still have in the UK, despite quite high investment over recent years. In fact, we had record investment over the last 5 years, yet we've still got NAFRA 2 coming out earlier this year and showing that flood risk is now recorded at a higher level than ever before. That really shows us, I think, the challenge that we've got ahead of us and the role of PFR in addressing it. We have got areas where we cannot really defend any further with traditional flood defences because we would be displacing that risk. We've got areas of flood risk that we can identify much better than before because of the improvements in flood maps, and particularly the improvements in satellite technology, which allow us to identify at much more local level where water is likely to pool and where surface water risk is likely to manifest. We've got areas with quite complex and multiple flood risk. We've got lots of areas with very low depth flood risk. There's a role for PFR in all of this. But in some cases, that PFR will be the only way, in fact, we can address some of these types of flood risk. So I think the role of PFR is going to get much, much more important. For insurers, the value of PFR is becoming more acute because the cost of flooding are going up considerably. It was just a few years ago we used to talk about a flood costing about 30 grand. Now it's, you're lucky if you can get flooded and it costs less than 60 grand. And with that expense going up to the insurer, the level of disruption for the householder is also going up. A large part of that increase in cost is because we're seeing elongated periods out of homes, high cost of alternative accommodation. So the value for both homeowners and their insurers of trying to keep people in their homes, trying to stop water entering or reduce the damage that it causes is really significant and growing. And I'm really pleased that today we've got Vicky from Aviva, one of the UK's leading insurers, talking about the way that they've embraced PFR and the way they're supporting some of their householders to rebuild their homes after a flood, and that's really important. One of the other things about PFR being a kind of fairly new approach to flood resilience is that some of our structures are not as developed as they are around other types of flood defences, particularly when we think about how we do business cases, how we demonstrate the benefit of PFR. And that's the real value of today's session that Paul and CIWEM have put together, I think, is looking at the different funding structures and what they allow and how they're being utilised. I sometimes think some of these funding structures can be a little bit of a straitjacket. So I'd be really interested to hear today how different providers are using them in different ways and making the most of them to protect homes and householders. And I think really good for us to reflect in the questions and across the piece how those how the technical standards are developing or have developed in response to these different demands put on by the funding structures. But I think that's it really for me, other than say thank you to Paul and the CIWEM community for organising today, ONR and the funders of the BeFloodReady. As you'll see, FloodReady is one of those. That's why Paul's given me the microphone for a minute this morning. So anyway, say thank you to those and everyone for organising it, and really to echo Paul's ask for questions. Otherwise, you'll be hearing even more of me that you don't want. But like, I think these sessions are definitely the most interesting when we get questions and different perspectives coming through. So as Paul mentioned, we're going to do the first part is looking at Build Back Better, which is an insurer-funded scheme. This is where your insurance company provides funding as part of your rebuild process to implement resilience in a claim and afterwards. This is an initiative FloodReady has developed with our insurer partners, and we're going to hear from a couple of them today. We'll have a Q&A on that, and then we will hear about some of the publicly funded schemes from the EA and local authorities, and then we'll have a Q&A on that. So without further ado, I'm really delighted to be handing over to Vicky from Aviva, who I'm really hoping is on the call. There you are, Vicky, to talk about their approach to BBB. And as I say, FloodReady has worked with our insurers to develop the BBB offer, and it's really great to see, for us to see how far Aviva have got in this. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation. I think it's going to be great. Cheers.
Thanks, Martin, for the introduction. And hi, everybody. So as Martin says, I'm Vicky, and my role at Aviva is a claims sustainability lead. I thought I would just start today by just giving a bit of a brief introduction to Build Back Better, and give some context as to how this aligns strategically for us at Aviva. So Build Back Better was launched, as Martin said, by FloodReady in April 2022, and the purpose is to help homes and areas affected by flooding. So Build Back Better is designed to reduce the cost and impact of future floods by including property resilience measures as part of the flood repairs. Flooding is devastating, as we know. It has a devastating impact on our customers and their communities, and Aviva has long been an advocate for flood resilience. Property flood resilience measures can reduce the impact of flood damage, reducing the financial impact of flooding, but importantly, reducing the disruption to people's lives that flooding can cause. PFR can often reduce the time that a customer needs to spend away from their home, for example, helping to lessen the emotional toll that a flooding can take. Build Back Better aligns strongly with Aviva's sustainability ambitions. So we have an ambition to be a net zero insurer by 2040, and we have a climate resilience strategy which aims to support customers and their communities to be more resilient to climate change. We know that the number of homes and businesses at risk of flooding is increasing due to climate change, and through our Building Future Communities campaign, we're trying to raise awareness of the challenges faced by homes and businesses in preparing for future climate risks. As part of this, we're making calls for change to planning regulations and policy. These are actions that we believe need to be taken collectively and urgently to make properties more resilient to climate change. These calls for change include, we're calling for a 3-step check in planning regulations, and that is built in the right place with the right materials and built with resilience as standards. We're calling for planning rules to be further strengthened to help prevent unsuitable development of homes and commercial buildings in current and future flood risk zones, and for building regulations to mandate a baseline level of low cost but effective PFR measures for new properties in high risk areas. In addition to the emotional and financial impact of flooding, which are well documented, our 2023 Building Future Communities report also highlights the carbon impact of flood claims, which can be significant. So it's around 13.9 tonnes of CO2 emissions per claim, which is the equivalent to 6.5 return flights from London to New York. The report also shows that PFR measures can reduce the carbon impact of a flood claim by up to 64%. Therefore, we see that adapting to extreme weather and reducing emissions are two sides of the same coin and to be tackled together. Aviva research also shows that consumer awareness of flood risk and the actions homeowners can take to reduce their risk is low. It's fair to say that as an industry, we've got a significant challenge to engage homeowners on flood risk and resilience. Aviva recognises the importance of standards on good practice and was one of the original sponsors of the PFR Code of Practice. And we're also proud to be a current partner of the Community of Practice, and we'll continue to do what we can to support development of PFR. Aviva launched Build Back Better in August 2023, and we're really proud to say that we've supported over 400 customers with the scheme so far. Next slide, please, Paul. Thank you. So that's just a bit of context, really. So on to the next part, which is our approach to Build Back Better. So the Build Back Better scheme allows each insurer to determine its own eligibility criteria and thresholds. And following a flood claim, Aviva offers household customers access to property flood resilience costs of up to £10,000, and that's in addition to the reinstatement cost caused by a flood. This will pay for the installation of flood resistance and recoverability measures designed to prevent or reduce the impact of future flood events. And this cover applies to flood claims where the buildings damage for Aviva, where the buildings damage, including alternative accommodation costs, is equal to or more than £25,000. Build Back Better is a completely new area of expertise for insurers, and it's fair to say we've been on a significant learning journey since we first signed up to the scheme in 2022. In terms of our approach, we set up a project team in 2022 and aligned resources to focus specifically on Build Back Better. We conducted a thorough review of the market and identified potential supply chain partners to collaborate with. Our Build Back Better delivery has been in two main phases. Firstly, we worked closely and collaboratively with existing insurance supply partners, and that was to help us get started on our journey and to learn. And then secondly, we've onboarded specific PFR practitioners to become our direct supply chain, with whom we've collaborated extensively with in order to create an effective end-to-end Build Back Better insurance claim journey. Our internal claims managers have completed the CIWEM PFR foundation training, and they work directly with the flood risk surveyor and the PFR installers to deliver Build Back Better directly for our customers. The PFR Code of Practice has guided us in our Build Back Better delivery, and it aligns really well with consumer duty requirements. For those who aren't familiar with this, consumer duty is a set of rules for financial services in the UK. It was introduced by the FCA in 2022, and the duty sets high standards of consumer protection across financial services and requires firms to put their customers' needs first. Our Build Back Better project team found the PFR Code of Practice homeowner checklist in particular, which outlines what a consumer can expect from PFR delivery aligned to the Code of Practice, particularly helpful as an audit tool to evidence good customer outcomes. We've incorporated the various stages of the Code of Practice into our claims process, ensuring that best practice is observed throughout the journey. Next slide, please, Paul. So successes and challenges then. So challenges first. So we recognised at the very beginning of the procurement journey that the PFR insurance claims market is a new and emerging market, which is still in its infancy and with a limited supply chain in terms of the numbers and the geographical coverage of suppliers. And there are relatively low volumes of claims, which is a challenge. The supply side of the market will ultimately develop over time, and we're doing what we can to support this through a direct supply chain. We think it would be helpful if more of the insurance industry used a panel of suppliers. Confidence in professionals delivering PFR for our customers is absolutely essential, and industry training and certification provides assurance around capability. Secondly, the flood claim journey is already hugely complex with multiple stakeholders involved, and navigating the expectations of all of those stakeholders and aligning Build Back Better to the existing claim journey is challenging. Obviously, we've got our policyholder and their families at the front and centre of our processes. We also have building contractors, drying and restoration technicians, asbestos removal experts, alternative accommodation and contents providers. And all of these aspects of recovery need to be managed effectively alongside the PFR delivery. We've made really good progress, I think, but there's still work to do in raising awareness and knowledge of PFR across our wider supply chain. The timing of the engagement with customers is absolutely critical. So Build Back Better happens at a time, as we said, when customers have suffered a traumatic event and need time to process the loss. And often customers aren't ready to discuss PFR at the outset of the claim. And when their main concern at that point is for their family, their pets, their possessions, and of course the damage to their home. Our experience is that it can be weeks, if not months, for customers to be ready to discuss the Build Back Better offer. And this creates challenges to align PFR with the ongoing claim journey. For example, in relation to Storm Babette, after 3 months, uptake was around 30% of eligible flood claims, but after 8 months, it was 50%. So customers were deciding to take up the Build Back Better after a considerable way into the claim journey. Our teams are all trained to recognise that timing is key when engaging with customers on Build Back Better. However, I think it's fair to say that we have much more that we can learn about how to optimise these conversations in the future. Excuse me. We're also exploring what more we can do to engage with customers on resilience and Build Back Better pre-claims so that customers are more aware of the cover before they suffer the loss. Build Back Better cover is being written into all of our policy wordings, but there's more that can be done to promote Build Back Better and resilience more widely. On this point around timing, government grants following a flood event to encourage resilience measures are really helpful. However, the process for claiming can often be quite lengthy and complex and can differ by local authority. And this makes it challenging to align with the delivery of Build Back Better. Customer delay in accepting Build Back Better, along with the extended lead times for manufacturer and resistance measures in surge events, can impact reinstatement works and or the level of PFR measures that can be incorporated into a customer's property. And then finally, customer concerns over PFR remains a challenge. So rates of uptake from customers are improving over time. And we've got some fantastic customer feedback on Build Back Better, particularly from customers who have flooded previously before the cover was available. However, there are still challenges to overcome with customers concerned about the impact of installing PFR on their ability to resell their home, for example, or the simple aesthetics that installing PFR might bring. Some customers do ask us if there will be a positive impact on their premium, and currently property flood resilience measures are not reflected in pricing, as more research is needed to understand the efficacy of individual measures, which will be determined by whether the PFR is installed by an accredited provider, but also that it's maintained and used properly by the homeowner themselves. The communication of Build Back Better offer to customers and resulting uptake will inevitably improve over time as it becomes more established and we learn how to optimise it. And we've got some really good examples where customers who have installed resilience measures can become advocates, and that if take up actually increases if one house in the street has installed them, as others are more likely to follow. So on to successes then. So as I've said, we've supported over 400 customers with the scheme so far, and we've got some excellent customer feedback on the scheme. Customers really welcome the opportunity to make their home more resilient. Our direct supply chain model puts us at the very heart of engagement with our customers on Build Back Better, and that enables us to leverage the experience of our internal team to project manage the claim and all the relevant aspects of flood recovery, and to use the expertise of our supply chain to help guide customers to make the best possible choices to improve the resilience of their home. Working collaboratively with our PFR practitioners has been mutually beneficial too, so supporting all parties to understand what good looks like to deliver PFR with an insurance environment, which is of course heavily regulated. Being an insurance supplier brings added governance for businesses to adhere to, and we've worked closely with our supply chain to understand what an effective insurance solution would look like and work together to overcome obstacles. We invested a considerable amount of time in thoroughly detailing our ways of working, which are fully aligned to the Code of Practice. And these ways of working examine the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders in delivering PFR within the insurance claim journey. We're still really early on in the journey, so our direct supply chain model launched in September 2024, and we're continuing to learn and refine the model as we go. The Code of Practice has guided the project team throughout. It's been a huge asset to us right from the outset, from the market review that we completed and sourcing potential suppliers, all the way through to the model design, onboarding processes and training. The CIWEM Foundation training has provided our teams with an excellent understanding of what they should expect from good PFR delivery, and the Code of Practice homeowner checklist has been particularly helpful to us to develop our audit and governance structure. And then finally, as I say, we've been on a significant learning journey over the past 2 years, and it has been a great journey. We've learned vast amounts, and we're continuing to learn and develop our capabilities as we go. We're using the learnings, working closely with the PFR experts in our supply chain and collaborating widely across the industry to continuously improve. Through this, we'd hope to see the growth of the PFR supply chain and uptake from customers increase as we learn how to optimize engagement and with customers on Build Back Better. And then the final slide is just key takeaways, really. So just to summarize, we've learned loads over the past 2 years, and it's a completely new area of expertise for insurers, and we're just continuing to learn and refine and improve as we go. Collaborating with supplier partners is absolutely key to deliver the right outcomes, and the industry training and certification process provides insurers with confidence on the capability of supply chain and the quality of PFR delivery. And then just finally, the PFR Code of Practice has been instrumental in our design, helping to align Build Back Better with existing claims processes. And that's everything from me for now, Martin. I hope that was useful, everyone, and thanks for listening. And then I'll pass back to you, Martin, if that's okay.
That was great, Vicky, and I learned quite a lot from that. Someone who's been working on Build Back Better for a lot, so it was really good. And one thing I really took from that is a reminder of how complex this has been to implement into an insurance supply chain. And I think Vicky made it look very smooth in that, but actually one of the challenges with the insurance sort of claim process that Vicky talked about there is that once a flood happens, you go from none to 400 cases all at once, and you don't know where they're going to be in the country, and you can't forward plan. So Vicky made it seem very smooth, but it's a lot of work to get it as smooth as that. So and we're going to hear Gareth, who's come from the PFR sector, but now a key BBB provider. So sort of the opposite perspective from Vicky in a sense, but on the same topic. Gareth, are you ready?
I am, yeah.
Great.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. My name's Gareth Boyd. I'm the Chief Executive at Watertight. So, yes, so Watertight, we're leading providers of property flood resilience. Our main client is the Environment Agency, where we're on the EA's PFR framework. We also work for a number of local authorities, Department for Education, and provide Build Back Better through the FloodReady scheme. Coming on off the back of what Vicky's saying, you know, significant learning journey it really has been. And the key difference between what we do with the Environment Agency, which Russell Burton will talk about later during the webinar, and BBB, is that the Environment Agency generally are planned works, whereas Build Back Better is reactive. So we're delivering PFR to individual property owners, but it's really about, it's been a whole different way of delivering PFR. So it's the same, but different. Anyhow, Watertight, what we do is we design, source, install, and maintain bespoke and innovative PFR solutions. To do that, we take into account the person, the property, and the flood, and everything, the solutions designed and delivered within the scope of the industry code of practice. We don't manufacture products, but provide a range of project management services, advice, and solutions, and we've developed the Resilico flood compliance platform. So today I'm going to talk about delivering Build Back Better through a case study, talk about why rates are low. We're going to talk about how we're maximising the value of Build Back Better and make some conclusions. So delivering a Build Back Better, a case study, and Paul, maybe if you want to go past this slide, because Vicky's done very well to explain what Build Back Better is. So we've been involved with FloodReady since the launch of April 22, where we attended Parliament with FloodReady and demonstrated products, etc., to the dignitaries who attended. We are the delivery partner for a leading British insurer, and before the surge event in 2023, we'd done about 20 Build Back Better claims. We just started to test how Build Back Better would work. The surge event 2023-24 saw a further 130 claims come in, and since then there's been another 50. So what I'm talking to you about today is based on our experience of delivering over 200 Build Back Better jobs. I would say that we did have a surge plan in place with Lloyd's, but it didn't expect the geographic spread of claims, which you can see in this next slide. So this would be one of the first key differences between delivering Build Back Better for an insurer and doing a scheme for a local authority or the Environment Agency. As you can see there, that's the heat map for Build Back Better. It was from the south of England right up to the north of Scotland and everywhere in between. So when the surge came, we had to be prepared to be able to deliver that. When we work for the Environment Agency or local authorities, obviously it's restricted to a smaller geographic area, and you're better able to plan for the works. So the lessons that we've learned through over the last 2 years of delivering Build Back Better, key themes are the power of Build Back Better. I'm going to talk about protection versus adaptation. There is a battle or a negotiation, as it were, within what PFR is, and to talk about some of the things that Vicky's already covered about the communication, particularly the timing. That's our experience as well. So the power of Build Back Better, it's been an overwhelming success. It really has. It's empowered individuals. It's given them the feeling that they can make a difference to their own circumstances and those of their community to manage the risk, take responsibility, and have some control. We've had a very, very positive reception from homeowners to the extent that when we're on site and some of their neighbours are inquiring as to what's happening, they wish that they had an insurer who'd been signed up to the Build Back Better scheme. However, there is a need for more education and awareness about Build Back Better, particularly prior to the flood, and that would be at the point of sale rather than the point of claim. On the right there, you can see the flood hierarchy, and PFR sits somewhere in the middle, just under what we would deem traditional defence schemes, whether they're at a national or a community level. Where PFR, and Martin talked about it briefly in his introduction, PFR is really going up that hierarchy now so that it is deemed now as a measure of first resource as opposed to last resource, and it's also now being used to deal with the residual risk from some of the big traditional engineered schemes that exist. So the next slide is really, that's a customer testimonial that came via Mary Long Dono. And again, that emphasises the difference between how we deliver PFR through Build Back Better and through, say, an Environment Agency scheme. So it's highlighted there. It's a positive example of constructive collaboration between insurance companies, customers, and other agencies. So in our experience, PFR delivered through Build Back Better involves a greater number of participants than it does through an EA scheme, because even insurance companies, that's loss adjusters, restoration contractors, even the insurance company themselves. So there's a whole range of stakeholders involved in a Build Back Better claim that you would normally have in the traditional way that we would deliver PFR. So it's government policy to move away from protection to adaptation, protection being the traditional flood defences and adaptation being about, doing things to properties to make them the damage less if there's a flood. Again, talk about education and awareness. So Build Back Better has really allowed us to have this discussion with homeowners. So if you think about it at a national level, we're talking about protection versus adaptation. And when that comes down to an individual property level, that's when we talk about resistance or recoverability. So those are the conversations that Build Back Better has now really allowed us to have with people, to allow them to understand the bigger picture as regards flood risk management. So there is a negotiation, there really is, within PFR. PFR consists of 3 things: resistance measures, which is protection; recoverability, that's adaptation, that's about reducing the damage; and then there's preparedness. Build Back Better at £10,000 less the VAT nets in about 833, and by the time you've taken some survey costs out of that, it's really only ever going to be a contribution towards the resilience of a property. It's unlikely that money will cover the full suite of measures that are required to fully protect a property. So that's the sort of conversations that we need to have with people, that they're on a journey, that we're trying to best use this £10,000 towards making their house more resilient. And we also let them know that Build Back Better, PFR, there's no one size fits solution. It really is a jigsaw, and there's always going to be some residual risk. So resistance measures, that's doors, barriers, etc., designed to keep water out. And what we have found is that, you know, it's not a surprise, but this is what's most commonly requested by homeowners when we do a survey with them, because they see that as protection. The next slide then is recoverability. So that's about adapting the property with measures, products, and construction methods that reduce the damage caused if water does enter the building. So adaptation could possibly be an upgrade. So if the door is damaged and it would normally be repaired or replaced, by upgrading that to a flood door. So that's about knitting the Build Back Better funds into the existing insured repairs. Recoverability is what we've found is a harder conversation to have with people, because it's generally about what will happen the next time they flood, and there's a perceived benefit maybe to the insurer rather than the homeowner at the time of the claim. Finally, the third part of PFR is preparedness, and that's really, we believe that everything should start with preparedness. That's knowing what to do and when to do it. So that's access to flood alerts, having a flood plan in place, and maintaining your PFR. And you don't necessarily have to have PFR in place to have a flood plan. You know, your flood plan can be to move your car, your pets, move valuables upstairs, etc. Even use gaffer tape. There are some simple things that people can use. So regardless of whether people decide to go for resistance measures or recoverability, preparedness is always going to be required. So this next slide is actually one that I would, when I do a presentation, I would just use this to illustrate to people the number of options. But when I was asked today to talk about the difference of delivering PFR, I actually sort of analysed it a bit. So what we have here is 22 different measures that can make a property more resilient. Of those 22, 7 are what we would call resistance, 10 are recoverability, 2 are SUDS, and 3 are preparedness. Now, if this was an Environment Agency PFR framework scheme, it only funds resistance measures. And of the 7 resistance measures that are on that, we could actually only at the moment use 6. So if it was an EA scheme, there's maybe only option to use 6 measures from that. Build Back Better, if we go on to the next screen, please, Paul. What Build Back Better has really done, I think, for the PFR industry, has allowed us to reframe what PFR is all about. And you can see again from this infographic that I pinched from Mary, that preparedness sits at the bottom. It all starts with preparedness. And then when you get above, recoverability long term is going to be more important than resistance measures. But again, going back to previous slide, it's resistance measures that people generally want when we speak to them. So if you go on to the next slide, this is a case study from a Build Back Better job that we got in Brecon in Scotland. So Brecon has a big engineered, behind those sandbags on the left is an engineered wall. So people in the estate to the right believed that they were protected. Unfortunately, the wall was breached and there was no PFR in any of the properties behind. So I took this photograph myself in December of 2023. So this was 6 weeks post the flood, and you can still see the tide mark on the gable wall of that property beside the skip. Next slide. So that's again, when I was putting these slides together for the talk today, it really struck me that Build Back Better, from our point of view at Watertight, delivering PFR is a totally different experience, even for our surveyors or what we do compared to normal planned works with the Environment Agency. You know, that would have been the first time that I've been in a house like that, so close to a flood taking place. Generally, local authority schemes or PFR delivered through the Environment Agency would be planned and would be some weeks or months or even years post the flood, or in some cases, properties identified for PFR through the Environment Agency haven't yet ever flooded. So you can see there, we're in a house. The smell really hits you. It's quite devastating. And we met the lady who owned this house at the property that day, and she'd had to travel 10 miles. So she was in temporary accommodation, and that sort of touches on some of the stuff Vicky was talking about. So we met this lady, she was in her 70s. This was the first time she'd be back into her house in 6 weeks post the flood. And you could just see, you know, the contractors had come in, taken everything out and put it in the skip. And she was actually quite upset when we were there with her in the property. Paul, if you could move on then. So that's her living room. You can see the tide mark at 1.2 meters on the wall, and then you can see all her possessions, all the possessions she had in the world, lying in a skip outside her house. So that really did hit me that day. You know, not only the impact that flooding has on people, but how different it is to deliver PFR through Build Back Better than it is through the Environment Agency. I'll not cover this slide too much because Vicky was able to talk through this. What it really did demonstrate to us, having done the initial jobs through that surge event, was that timing is everything. You know, you're absolutely right, Vicky. It was far too soon in that lady's journey for us to be asking her, did she want a barrier or a door? And she couldn't accept that maybe resistance measures wouldn't work on her property because, as you saw, the height of the flood was at 1.2 meters, and generally resistant measures only work up to 600. So the biggest lesson that we learned early on in the Build Back Better process was about timing and when to communicate. So yes, so this is a bit of a comparison that I've done in the past, trying to put into context how delivery of PFR through Build Back Better differs from other schemes. So Build Back Better started in 2022. It's reactive. There's £10,000. Take-up rates have been low. EA PFR schemes started about over 12 years ago. It's maybe up to £15,000 now. And then you have the Deferred Repair and Renew grant, which is £5,000. So both the EA schemes and the Deferred Repair and Renew grant, you know, they do have higher take up because they've been going longer. Build Back Better, I think, was unfairly judged as having lower take up rates because the scheme had only just started to get into action, and we were all trying to have a go and see what we would do when we were hit with this unprecedented surge event where we all had to learn lessons very, very fast. So a lot of the lessons that we already understood through delivering normal PFR didn't really apply to Build Back Better because the timings and dealing with distressed customers, etc., was a different matter entirely. So if we go on, so I think we'll maybe pass that slide as well because I'm conscious I'm taking up too much time here. So how do we maximize the value of Build Back Better? Part of the journey that we have been on is that prior to working with Lloyds and Build Back Better and BeFloodReady, we hadn't really been involved in the sort of post-incident time when you're going in to repair a property post a flood. So these were slides that were put together for the British Damage Management Association conference last year. Ian Gibbs from Sedgwick put them together, and it's about maximising the value of Build Back Better, and it's all to do with teamwork. So it's all about how the loss adjuster, the restoration contractors, and the PFR contractors, stroke surveyors all come together. So the loss adjuster, they may be first on the scene. You know, they need the knowledge, skills, and confidence. They need to understand how to talk to people, as we've been experiencing ourselves. And they need time to be able to invest in winning over homeowners. So this time needs to be taken into managing the process. It's very it was evident then that maybe the first people on site would be the restorers or the restoration companies. Well, that's the next slide. So these are the guys who they were probably the guys who arrived on site and put all that lady's contents into that skip. So they need to be educated to ensure that they do not rip out PFR measures, whether they're resistance measures or recoverability measures that already exist in the property. So there's a whole education piece that's had to be done. It's only starting now with the restoration contractors. So they again need to be educated to explain to people what Build Back Better is all about. So again, that's a difference in how PFR is now being delivered through Build Back Better as opposed to an EA scheme. And finally, you know, the surveyors as well. Normally on schemes, surveyors have more time. There's lots more engagement you know, a PFR scheme through the Environment Agency could take months, if not a number of years, with engagement events, etc., etc. We don't have that time or luxury with Build Back Better. It's straight into it once there's a flood. So surveyors again have to be trained in different ways as how to react post a flood. So I think about to conclude here. Yeah. So key messages are the Build Back Better is a fantastic opportunity for all. It is very well received. Take-up rates are where we would have expected them in a new scheme and with a surge event. I do believe that Build Back Better and mainstreaming PFR are intrinsically linked. Build Back Better really has given us a more flexible way to look at delivering PFR to different properties. But going back to education awareness, not just to Build Back Better, but also PFR, it needs to be improved. That's me.
Thanks, Gareth. That was great. There was lots in there.
Yeah.
And we've got loads of questions that I'm just trying to go through. I'm going to start at the bottom actually, because some of these are coming in for you, Gareth, if you're ready. How would a restoration contractor know if measures have been installed in the past?
Good question. Unless somebody's there to tell them, they won't. But if there is, that something that could be incorporated within a flood performance certificate? Or
Yeah, it certainly is.
I don't think there's any other way.
Gareth, here's one. There don't seem to be any independent flood resilient advisors in London, nor any firms that fit flood resilience measures. As we are vulnerable to surface water flooding impacting on lower ground floor flats, we need different advice and measures from areas vulnerable to river flooding with wholly ground level homes. Can you help with encouraging such advice and companies that can provide relevant PFR?
Yeah, well, Martin, maybe you could answer this one as well, but through the Bondfield review, we are looking, you know, as Vicky said as well, the PFR industry is very immature, and you're absolutely right. There's not very many contractors, but there are massive number of contractors out there, whether it's restoration contractors or people in similar industries who could be coming in to do PFR. So at some stage, there will be a lot more practitioners. That doesn't answer the question right now, but there are a number of us who would be able to cover the London area.
And I mean, I think that was a good answer, Gareth, but also I'd say you have just founded the professional trade body of the PFR industry, and partly that will hopefully build it up and help us come across some of those technical questions about, for example, how we help with basements. We've got a question here, but can the grants be combined, giving circa 30k? I'm possibly best placed to answer that from FloodReady, in that, in theory, the DEFRA recovery grant and BBB should better work together. The EA scheme is proactive, so it rarely coincides, but both the DEFRA scheme and BBB should be able to come together. We've got a question here. We recently got our contents insurance renewal. It said they could not offer the policy if we'd put any flood resilience measures. We've put in an NRV, which I presume is a non-return valve, because some properties locally were flooded in 2021, and Thames has put no return valves into these properties. This seems wrong. Any comments? Vicky, have you seen this? Is this part of your that a flood policy should rule out?
No, so I saw the comment, and I would just say I'm surprised by that, if I'm honest. So it's not something that I've seen that we would be ruling it out for installing measures. As I said, at the moment, we're not yet in a position across the industry to reflect measures in premiums, but that is ultimately where we're heading to go, and the flood performance certificates will absolutely help that, but definitely not ruling out cover based on installation of measures. No. But without knowing the specific details,
And I should just say, from FloodReady's perspective, you certainly wouldn't that certainly wouldn't stop your insurer reinsuring through FloodReady, and therefore passing the risk on to FloodReady if they weren't comfortable holding it. I've got a good question here from Lorna. Is there any work being done to incentivise installation of PFR measures, a bit like black box for drivers, a way to incentivise those who install before being flooded? Realise cost is a big factor, prevention is better than a cure. Vicky, do you want to come in on that one?
Yeah, I think they're things that we're looking at as an industry and with you guys at BeFloodReady, Martin, isn't it? Just around, yeah, what are the potential opportunities for us to be able to incentivize? I think some of the things that we've talked about, you know, being VAT free or different limits and things. So we definitely want to engage with customers pre-claim. As we've said, we recognise that we've got a lot to do as an industry to increase awareness of property flood resilience before we claim, and we are actually looking at ways that we could broaden the scope of resilience measures. So for a long time, actually, before Build Back Better as an insurer, we've been supporting customers with the low cost, no cost measures, for example, so raising plug sockets, for example, when we're reinstating. So we've been doing that for a while. I think, as you say, the cost implications of broadening it out are something that we need to look at as an industry and support with BeFloodReady, but it's definitely a very live conversation at the moment.
Yeah.
Can I just add on that, Martin?
Yeah.
That's the concept of sort of build better before. And again, it all starts with education and awareness. And what we're trying to do as an industry is normalize PFR. So what we want people to understand is that when they're doing any other interventions to their property, could they make it a resilient intervention? So the example I like to give is if you've got a floor mounted boiler, gas boiler or oil boiler in your property and you need to replace it, if you replace it wall mounted, that's actually a recoverability measure.
Yeah.
So it's educating people just to think about every time they do something in their property, if they could do it, which is more flood resilient.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'm just reading through these questions here. We've got a question from John in the East Midlands saying that after the sort of flooding they've had over the last 18 months, very few people have had BBB or been offered BBB. I'd say, John, that BBB is in its infancy still. It was only went live 2 years ago, and different insurers have come on board at different points and are ramping it up at different speeds. So we would encourage people to check with their insurers. Vicky really discussed the kind of complexity of getting this rolled out across supply chains, that different loss adjusters, the whole claims journey know how to get know to mention it to customers, and that's been a big challenge across the piece. So you've got to understand this is a scheme that is still developing. Anything to add to that, Vicky?
I would just echo that, really. It's like any new offer to customers, it's going to take a while to embed. And yeah, it's about educating our internal teams to recognise when it's met the threshold and when there's opportunity. It's about engaging our supply chain to make sure that they're aware of property flood resilience and Build Back Better. So yeah, just to echo what we said earlier, it's a learning journey. I'd hope that there aren't many of those kind of situations where we've missed the boat with customers, but equally, because the claim journey, a typical claim journey for us is 12 months. We've got many engagements with the customer to make sure that we're not missing those opportunities too frequently. But as you've just said there, the offer is in its infancy. Different insurers are at different stages with their implementation, and there's a lot of learning and education to do internally. So yeah, we'll get better and we will improve over time.
Yeah, I think that's. I've got a question here that again might be a bit more for BeFloodReady, really. Flooded residents often fear that reporting flooding to the council will risk their premiums going up. How would Vicky suggest that local authorities encourage residents to report flooding despite their fear? Vicky, do you want to answer that? Do you want me to?
Yeah, so I would just think that it's about helping homeowners in the communities understand that by raising it with the local authority, it's about identifying that those issues are there. So if you've been flooded, is it about blocked drains, for example? Is it about drainage? Is it about the proximity to a river? But wherever the cause of the water is coming from, it can only help everybody if we put measures in place to improve it and reduce that risk for future. So I think it's probably just around an education piece really around working to improve and reduce flood risk, and we can only do that if we're aware that an incident's occurred in the first place and the level of risks that's currently there.
I mean, as my understanding on top of that is that firstly, LAs won't pass that information to insurers as to where flooding is. Insurers get their information from claims information, and then they also send drones out over floods to understand where the water's gone. And I should also say from FloodRe's perspective, the FloodRe scheme is there for eligible houses. Insurers can choose to pass the risk on. So you won't know if you're insured with FloodRe, but we might be reinsuring the risk on behalf of your primary insurer, and our rates are fixed. So you might see a bit of an increase if you weren't flooded and then you have been flooded, but you'll then be passed to the FloodRe scheme, and your cost won't then increase more than that because the insurers just pass the risk on to FloodRe, and that risk is there. So I'm just going through the rest of the questions. Yeah, someone from the LFFA has just said the same point in the comments here. This one might be one for you, Gareth. You mentioned about PFR potentially being implemented within the building regulations in the future as a way of enforcing BBB within construction. Can you tell us any more about this? With climate change increasing risk from damage by water and the level of regulations cover surrounding fire risk, would it be beneficial to regulate water as we do fire?
Right, yes. I know I was involved in the Bricks and Water 4 policy review, and one of the recommendations that came out of it was that there should be, I think you mentioned it, Vicky, a no regrets approach. So there should be basic PFR put into building regulations, particularly for new build. Now, we're not suggesting that new builds should be built that need barriers or flood doors put in place, but basic things like raising sockets, etc., smart air bricks absolutely need to be into basic building regs.
Yeah. A few of there's some quite good questions here, which I'm leaving because I think they're more for the afternoon session about public schemes. There's a question here. How do Aviva plan to cope with customers install their own PFR measures that have a clear impact of worsening flood risk to neighbouring properties? Vicky, do you want to have a go at answering that? I mean, FloodRe have also taken advice on this, so I can answer it as well.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Martin? Apologies.
How do Aviva plan to cope with customers who install their own PFR measures that have a clear impact of worsening flood risk to neighbouring properties?
I think that's, again, just to say that's something that we need to work through as an industry and alongside FloodRe. We've talked about the flood performance certificate. So Aviva is obviously collating data on the measures that have been installed. We will obviously, if we then have repeated floods, we will have a wealth of claims data that shows the impact that subsequent floods have had and whether or not those measures have been effective. And I think there's probably, Martin, it's probably fair to say that we need to work towards collated data across the industry so that we can see obviously where customers kind of move from one insurer to another, that we've got visibility of where those measures have been installed and then how effective they are over time. But I think probably the flood performance certificate, working towards the flood performance certificate as a mechanism for that is where we are as an industry in our thinking at the moment.
I think the specific point on I'd pick up in that question about if you install PFR, does that put your neighbours at risk, and therefore are you liable for that? We don't think that is an issue for two reasons. One of which is very hard to ever show that would be a problem, and two, so you'd really struggle, I think, to show causation, and two, you'd have to show negligence there, the tort of you'd acted negligently. You can protect your own property. That's not a negligent thing to do. So if you put in, flood barriers and that moves, if you did something like dammed up a stream going through your garden and that caused flooding, then that would be, then there would be a question. But just protecting your home isn't going to cause that risk. And equally, actually, where you might be putting your neighbours at risk is things like actually if you concrete over your garden or you put astroturf down that stops it being absorbable, that is putting yourself and your neighbours at quite significant increased flood risk. But it's not at the point really where you're likely to get sued.
Apologies, I think I misunderstood the question there. So I'd just add to that, you know, all of our Build Back Better claims, we will employ a flood survey, which will assess all of the different measures and the level of risk. And as we say, the purpose is to increase the resilience of the property, but we wouldn't expect that to negatively impact the properties that surround it. And that is something that should be picked up as part of the flood survey.
Yeah. We've got a question here. There are many frustrations around the time it takes for flood alleviation schemes to come forward. How can uptake of PFR and personal responsibility be promoted in the light of this? Gareth, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, going back to, I think it showed that the hierarchy, you know, people have got out of the way of maybe thinking about looking, you know, what they can do for their own property, because particularly in areas where there's an existing scheme or an engineered defence, now with climate change and NAFRA 2 coming out, there's opportunity now with climate change that some of those existing defences are going to be overtopped. So there's always the need for people to have some kind of ownership or responsibility for the risk at their own property. So again, it comes back to education and awareness. And I think through Build Back Better and other initiatives, it's sort of sending people now in the right direction. That, you know, and Becky, I think you showed in one of your slides some of the challenges. People think that PFR is ugly, or if you have it, my house isn't going to sell. We have to get across all those barriers, because they're not true, and actually promote it as something that allows people to live with the risk of flooding.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, just on that point, I think it's okay for me to say, Martin, that BeFloodReady are looking at a survey to customers to understand why customers are saying no. And I think those responses will be so powerful to help us get a better understanding of what are the blockages that prevent customers from taking up PFR and Build Back Better. We've got a good view already, I think, but really to get under the skin of some of those responses from customers where they've declined Build Back Better so that we can overcome them for future. I think it's going to be a really powerful piece of research.
Yeah, so I'm just reading through the questions. Thank you for that. I've got one here is different insurance companies have different triggers for BBB. If the damage threshold trigger was lowered, it would open up BBB for more flood affected properties. Why is BBB not available on every flood claim? Vicky, do you want me to answer that? Do you want to have a go?
So I can speak from Aviva's perspective, and you know, our rationale for putting the limits where we haven't put any restrictions on Build Back Better eligibility beyond the threshold, and really our thinking around the threshold was put at a level where we're supporting customers that have suffered the most significant flood losses. And what we are seeing from our Build Back Better data is actually that we are seeing higher rates of uptake in those higher cost bands. So actually in the lower claims, you know, our lower claim would be 25 to 50. The uptake from customers is lower, and it gets significantly higher as the claim costs increase, sort of demonstrating really that on the lower complexity claims, perhaps there's less of an appetite for a customer to install measures because perhaps they've suffered less of a, you know, disruption and things within the claims process. But certainly customers where they've suffered a significant loss, they are taking up higher rates of Build Back Better. So that's from our perspective. From a wider industry perspective, Martin, you may be best to...
I mean, I just point out the cost of installing it as a big cost, and it needs to be proportionate. As far as I know, I don't think any insurer is offering it on all claims. They might offer cost neutral repairs on all claims, but the additional cost payouts, it's a big cost for insurers to do that. So they, you know, I think all insurers are looking at where that is most effective and most appropriate. I've got a couple of questions in here about, well, one about should BeFloodReady be covering commercial properties and stuff that I think is a bit outside of today's discussion. Someone said if flood resilience became 100% for all properties, would there be any need for flooding insurance? Is it not insurers' interest to keep some risk? I mean, it's in BeFloodReady's interest to keep some risk, but we're a not-for-profit. I generally say insurers aren't offering just flood risk, they're offering home insurance. And I think if they paid out less flood insurance claims, they'd be pretty happy about that. I would point out fire. the rates of fire claims have gone down dramatically over the last 30 years because of changes at a building level. That has not put any insurers out of business, but it has saved a lot of lives and a lot of both cost and disruption. Vicky, this is one for you. You mentioned the carbon impact of flooded homes. Could you share a bit more about this and any research on it?
Yeah, so I can share our Building Future Communities report was an external publication. I can share, if it's okay for me to do so, I can share a link in the chat. So yeah, we measured the carbon impact of restoring a home following a flood, and obviously drying, strip out, and then the rebuilding is a significant driver of carbon emissions. And then just purely and simply by reducing the amount of damage that occurs by adding in PFR, you can just significantly reduce the cost, and that cost is obviously linked to carbon emissions. So yeah, and how we modelled that was the £10,000 that we offer through Build Back Better, typical measures that we would put in a typical home, and we just did some research around that from a carbon perspective. But I'll share the report, which goes into it in a lot more detail, in the chat.
Great. And then one which I think is for FloodReady, how will yesterday's launch of the FloodReady Academy assist the industry to help more customers to access BBB? The FloodReady Academy, for those that don't know, is a sort of training portal explaining to anyone in the insurance sector and loss adjusting sectors about FloodReady eligibility, etc., and also BBB and the principles. It really just picks up the stuff Vicky was talking about earlier about trying to spread awareness across a very large supply chain with multiple claim handlers, etc., etc. So it's really just to work with our insurers to try and spread that awareness in the hope that the multiple people dealing with a claim across different insurers can get the basic knowledge, and so if customers ask them about it, or they can inform customers, they know where to go. I think most of these other questions are either comments rather than questions, or possibly more for the afternoon, the next session about LLFAs. So thank you for all the questions. And that just leaves me to thank Gareth and Vicky very much for two very good presentations. As someone who's been working with BB for a long time, I still learn a lot from both. So thank you very much. And hopefully now we're ready. Russell is ready. Russell, are you there?
I'm here. Yes.
There was a pause there, Russell, which caused me some stress.
No problem at all, Martin. I've been listening intently. Yeah, some very good presentations from Vicky and Gareth. So yeah, a hard act to follow, I think. So I'll do my best. Talking to you about delivering PFR and the Environment Agency's PFR framework. Short introduction on myself. I'm the Managing Director of RAB Consultants, and we for our sins are a Lot 1 supplier to the Environment Agency on the PFR framework. Primary supplier in the Midlands hub, and I'll explain what a Lot 1 supplier is shortly, and also a secondary supplier in other hubs of the Midlands. So what I'm just looking to cover with you this afternoon, very briefly, I think better explain what the framework is, what it's about, what it means, and then share with you some experiences of the first year of working on that framework in the Midlands hub, and then any questions and some contacts for you to get further information. So if you move on, please. Okay, so the 2024 PFR framework, there was a previous framework that was in place before the code of practice was in place. So actually this was a much needed update of that framework to make it aligned with the code of practice, and again I'll explain how that occurs through this lot structure here. So there are two lots, two kinds of suppliers on the framework. As I say, we're a Lot 1 supplier, so we provide survey options and quality assurance for the PFR process. So one of the important things for us to do is to confirm eligibility and whether properties themselves are suitable to receive property flood resilience measures. And as Gareth alluded to, then through the framework, we're only supplying resistance measures. So essentially, we're making a structural assessment to see whether this property is going to be suitable for receiving those kinds of measures. So sorry, if you can just stay back on that slide, thanks. Yeah, so we do our survey, we identify options. That allows the Environment Agency or the Risk Management Authority to complete their business case ahead of employing the Lot 2 contractor. So again, Gareth is one of the Lot 2 contractors, and they're responsible for detailed design and construction. So they take our survey, do their own detailed survey as well, to measure up for the measures that are being recommended, and then install those measures and get on with the construction and the deployment of those measures by the homeowner in the future. So that's the difference between the Lot 1 and the Lot 2. We have to work very closely together throughout this process, so it really is a collaboration between the two. Next slide, please. Again, as I said, the framework has been, and the specifications for the work has been built around the code of practice. So here you see how the Lot 1 aligns to the 6 standards of the code of practice. So as a Lot 1 surveyor, we're doing the hazard assessment, assessing the flood risk from all sources, assessing the depths and durations of flood water that's likely to affect the property. Then we do the property survey. So we're assessing that property to see whether it's suitable for resistance measures in the first place. But integral with that is not just the property, but also the homeowner themselves, the end user. So again, any constraints or requirements that they may have as we're looking at the property. So taking into account what we learned from the property and the hazard assessment, then we're able to come up with some options as to how to achieve the optimum level of flood resilience for that particular property. We do still consider, although the framework is geared towards resistance measures, we are still making recommendations regarding recoverability and other measures that they might take in terms of preparedness for any flood risk in the future. So we are highlighting those things that can be taken forward by the homeowner, either with the works or by themselves at a later date, for example. So they do get a comprehensive report about the whole of their flood risk and resilience measures that they can do. So it's important we do this options development, and out of that we can get some outline costs that would allow the Environment Agency to finalise its business case and get the funding in place for the subsequent installation of those measures. You'll see there that that's not the end of the story for the Lot 1 suppliers. We come back at stage 5, standard 5, in the commissioning and handover. So that's the quality assurance role that we have to ensure that the measures have been installed as required and to specification, and the homeowners are understanding how to use those measures as well, delivered by the Lot 2 supplier. Next slide, please. So you can see this is almost the negative of the previous slide here. Very much in that link between standard 3 and standard 4, options development, design and construction. That's where you're going from your options that we've identified to the final detailed design, and so that often entails a design review. So actually deciding what the best optimum solution is for this particular property based on the budget available, the homeowner requirements and constraints, the findings of our property survey and the hazard, and also the recommendations of the building Lot 2 supplier. So out of those, that design review should come the final design agreed by all the parties. and then taken forward for construction. And then into commissioning and handover, so providing training, testing potentially of those measures. Wet testing can be involved in this process. So I think the contract allows for up to 20% of the properties being wet tested against those measures for their effectiveness, which would be observed by ourselves as well. And then the handover, so all the instructions and the training in how to use the measures going forward for the homeowner, because then it becomes down to that final stage, stage 6. You'll see that neither the lot 1 or the lot 2 supplier has that responsibility. It is handed back over to the homeowner or the end user via a homeowner agreement. So they have to sign an agreement committing to maintain those measures, and they understand how to deploy and operate them should they be required during a flood as well. So that's the lot 2. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the hubs. This is how the Environment Agency has split England into 6 different hubs. As I say, we're the lot 1 delivery partner for the Midlands hub, and we're working with White House Construction in the Midlands there. You can see Gareth and Watertight up in the northeast and the northwest, and our other colleagues on the framework, JBA and M3 Flood Tech and FPS Environmental Solutions, are all involved on the framework. Next slide, please. As well as the primary delivery partners, reserve delivery partners have been identified for each hub as well. So should the primary delivery partner be unable to deliver the service in that hub for whatever reason, there might be a flood, for example, that causes a demand, a higher than usual demand, or just a contractual reason why you can't agree the process. So therefore, the reserve partners are there available to step in should that happen. Moving on, thank you. All of the contract is delivered under the NEC forms of contract, professional services contract, generally option A, price contract with activity schedule, so for lot 1. So we've got various pricing workbook for all elements of the services that we provide. So doing your property survey and doing your post-installation audits as well in terms of the quality assurance. And for different types of houses as well, whether that's semi-detached or detached or a terraced house. So it's a really big spreadsheet of costs. And similarly for the lot 2 contractors, then they have an even bigger spreadsheet of costs for individual measures that may be required for a particular property. So all of these prices have been established through the tendering process, and therefore that should be good confidence as to the outturn costs that should be yielded following this process. Next slide, please. I suppose as a in terms of due diligence, then it's really important that all the contractors and suppliers are delivering the sort of measures in a way that the Environment Agency and public sector organisations would want them to be delivered. And the insurances are in place that we're fit and proper organisations to deliver that. So there is a lot of work that goes on and evidence that all the suppliers have had to provide by way of this, that we're delivering the social value requirements that we've got, that we're health and safety compliant, that we've got the appropriate insurances in place, and we're following the appropriate environmental requirements, particularly for an organisation like the Environment Agency. So committing to carbon reduction plans, for example, a 5% year-on-year reduction in carbon is required within the framework as well. So all of these measures, and I've only mentioned a few of them there, are covered and have formed part of the tender assessment. So if you are a public sector organisation looking to use this framework, I can absolutely assure you that we've been properly vetted and gone through this process, and it's monitored annually. So we have to renew annually and make sure all of that's up to date as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so although it is the Environment Agency frameworks, Environment Agency's framework, it is available for use by other risk management authorities. So certainly other government departments and agencies and public bodies can use it. Local authorities are all free to use it. Internal drainage boards are all free to use it, and central government departments are free to use it as well. In accordance with the scope of the contract. So it is aimed at, the scope does limit it to residential purposes. So it's not aimed at commercial properties, although that will extend to pubs and bed and breakfast type properties, but nothing industrial or really commercial property. So you do a high street shop, but you wouldn't be doing a supermarket through the framework, for example. But it is available for you to sign up to the framework and start to use the framework. Next slide, please. And these are the people to speak to if you do want to sign up to the contract. So Daniel Lamb is probably the key contact there, because he's responsible for the PFR framework across the country, but he's the Midlands hub lead. And then you'll see you've got different contacts in the Environment Agency commercial business support team in the different hubs as well. So there's a QR code you can scan there and get their contact details. Don't worry if you're not fast enough, because I'll bring that slide back up again at the end, so you can see who's on there. Next slide, please. Okay, so quickly just refreshing the sort of experiences that we've had in the Midlands hub over the first year of the framework. Next slide. It really has and is a collaborative framework between the Environment Agency, RAB and White House in the Midlands. And much of the first year has been ensuring that due diligence is in place. And so we've been attending framework managers and directors meetings, so that not only within the hub, but nationally, we're all aligned in how this framework is delivered. One of the real benefits of the framework has been the introduction of the Environment Agency's minimum technical requirements. So certainly a step forward in the previous framework. So now those technical requirements, I think, are providing a really useful benchmark as to minimum standards for not only the products, but also services and the overall delivery of PFR. And of course, there's been a big emphasis on health, safety, environmental and well-being issues on the framework as well. So we're all working in accordance with the Environment Agency's requirements regarding those matters, and attend national collaborative meetings regarding that. On the hub itself, then we've developed a SharePoint collaborative site. So each of the organisations has sight of documents and everything that's delivered during a project. We're having monthly supplier meetings coordinated by our Environment Agency hub lead, Dave Clark, and also having quarterly PFR program meetings, so that we can plan ahead for what work is coming, ensure that we've got resources available, and try and deliver against those resources and smooth out the programming of the work. Next slide, please. So again, one of the things that we have developed through this, not only within the framework, but we have to expand on this so that everybody understands the different steps, is the process essentially. I mean, it does start before the first of these actions here. So we didn't just we come in and do a survey. There's a lot of work that the Environment Agency and others do before that process to identify the need in the first place. community engagement to start to sign people up to this, being involved in any future project at a community level. And as Gareth alluded to, that these are community-based projects largely. So you've got a particular community at risk, and you might have 20, 30 properties that you're looking to target within that community. So getting as best sign up as you can. And that usually gives enough for the Environment Agency to commission us as Lot 1 contractors to undertake the survey. We'll get involved in further community engagement as well, issue our report, and then the agency is able to secure funding and get business case approval to bring forward the Lot 2 contractor, and then they can do their detailed survey and get into their process. Eventually going through that design review with them jointly together. So a big collaboration at that stage. Once they've installed the measures, then the pre-installation audit, the post-installation audit can take place. So that's that quality assurance role that we're able to fulfill. There might be some snagging there to just address some issues. Final sign-off can happen. And the homeowner pack is issued, again, importantly, with that homeowner agreement and understanding from them. Next slide, please. Big piece of work through this first part of the year has been establishing the program. So this is becoming a lot clearer now at this stage. It's fair to say it was a fairly slow start, needed to get these identified, and through the sausage machine there is the business case approval for the Environment Agency. But now we've identified this, and you can see on the right hand side there, we're starting to plan out the different stages of the project, so that we as surveyors understand when our resources might be required, and then you can anticipate when the Lot 2 suppliers' resources are required as well. And it just enables us all to program through and improve the flow of work through the program. So that's been a big piece of work for us. Next slide, please. So a few things, innovating and sharing good practices we've gone along. We've been recently had a supplier collaboration day. That's just between RAB and White House. We talked about new initiatives coming in regarding CDM and particularly asbestos, understanding the requirements for asbestos and identification of and the actions to take. We looked at the various product types and testing, because obviously when we're considering options, then we need to understand what the products are and the reasons why you might choose one type of product over another, and just trying to align our working practices so it can work as smoothly as possible. One of those is something called the option costing tool. So delivery for us out of at the end of our option development is to complete what's called an option costing tool. So this aligns or links with the Lot 2 contractors' pricing schedule, and that then turns out a cost, which allows the Environment Agency to secure that final business case and approval to a point. So that's needed some tweaking and development, improvement to make it work appropriately, and we can understand what we need to select in there in order for that to work. But we've overcome that now. I guess a recent thing is that we're having to take on board how NAFRA 2 new flood risk maps have been delivered now by the Environment Agency, and obviously understanding how we can interpret those now different from how they were before, and updating our report templates to reflect that data. And then some real world sort of actual project learning, so a project we've been in with Telford and Wrekin. This is Colebrookdale on the Severn. Actually, a number of the properties there had pre-existing resilience measures, and it is so often with these, with properties at risk from flooding, that they're often going on a journey. So maybe they've got active measures in place, and we're making recommendations that they could be converted to passive measures. Are they up to the current specification and standards? So how can we improve the resilience now of these products? And the installation and maintenance improvements may also be required. So we're where homes have existing measuring plans, this is a common thing now that we're coming to. So the challenges, conscious of my time here now. So challenges through this this first year. Firstly, it was about that establishing the pipeline. I think it's fair to say it was a little frustrating to start with, while we were waiting for the first jobs to be awarded. But we are into full swing of things now. I guess what's really kept us busy in this period, certainly ourselves, are the DEFRA grant schemes. So a number of the local authorities in the Midlands, so Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire, for example, they all had significant DEFRA grant schemes in place, and they did award those using the framework. So they signed up to the framework and used it. So we've been delivering those schemes as a Lot 1 surveyor. And so through the year, I think we've done 958 surveys, not just on those schemes, but throughout the whole year and all the projects we've done. But the vast majority of those have been on the grant schemes. And that was interesting, because the DEFRA's specification was slightly different to the agency specification, so we've had to adapt. And then you get the local authority interpretation and what they require themselves on top of that. So although we've done three schemes for three different authorities, they have all been different in the approach. The standard thing is the code of practice. So it does all get glued together by the code of practice. So it does work. So that contract standardization, it's a head scratcher at times. You have to think, well, does that work for this? And you might have to change some prices and things to make it all work the same. Previous framework contracts now, that framework is closed officially now, and so we're obviously we've got tail end work from the previous framework, and so transitioning from the old framework into the new framework is now coming to an end. But again, that's something that we've been managing through the year. And that due diligence requirement, yeah, that we really, you can be assured that we're all very responsible and good contractors on the framework. Next slide, please. So there we are. That's my reflections on the Environment Agency PFR Framework 2024. I've got those contacts there for the Environment Agency should anybody wish to sign up to the framework or learn more about it. And indeed, my own email address there if you want to speak to me. Happy to help.
Great, thank you, Russell, for going through the weeds and the processes that you have to get through to get PFR into a house through the grant scheme. I did call it a bit of a straitjacket and innovation earlier on. I feel less guilty about saying that now. We're going to hear now from Ashley, who's going to give similar process, but kind of the LA perspective on delivering PFR through the public grant schemes. Ashley, I'm hoping you're online. Can't see you.
I'm here. Yes, thanks, Martin.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone.
Great.
Yeah, I'm Ashley Myers, Flood Risk Programme Coordinator at Lincolnshire County Council. I sit within the Floods and Water team, and we're the kind of lead local flood authority within Lincolnshire. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you today about some of our experiences in delivering PFR. It's still relatively new for us as an authority, but we have had a number of different approaches over the last few years. The first one being was that in 2019 we worked quite closely with Essex County Council, who at the time were delivering their own property flood resilience scheme, which we kind of thought would be a good idea to trial within Lincolnshire. We invited several properties to apply based on their kind of flooding history, Section 19 investigations and that sort of thing. So as of those that were invited, 14 properties took up the offer and had a hazard and risk assessment and survey undertaken. As I mentioned, it was kind of led by Essex County Council due to their experience in delivering PFR, and they already had surveyors and contractors which were already procured and delivering. So we put in, we had a public cooperation public service cooperation agreement with them, PSCA, and they delivered it on our behalf. Out of the 14 that was surveyed, only 3 of those properties actually made it to installation due to varying reasons. One of them being that the grant available was only £5,000, so there was contribution required from homeowners. Following on from that, though, we did enjoy the kind of experience and the lessons we learned from that pilot. So we decided to take forward our own project within Lincolnshire in 2020. We did that kind of going out to procurement via LTC, and we used the code of practice, but our contract was actually for the preferred supplier to deliver both the survey and install. And as Russ alludes to, the EA framework was set up as having a lot 1 supplier and a lot 2 supplier. So that was something that the approach that we took. We opened the applications for residents to apply, and 28 were taken forward, with a further 28 on a reserve list. The contractor that was successful in delivering the phase 1 project was they had a number of resourcing issues and struggled to kind of deliver across both the survey and install, despite kind of winning the tender that we had put out. So of the 28, they actually only managed to install 6 PFR measures at those properties, and the contract wasn't renewed upon its end date in 2020. But because quite a significant lot of work had been done with those 28 properties, we decided to continue the project, calling it phase 2A and 2B, where we then utilised the EA framework in 2023. We used both lot 1, so Russ and his team as the Midland supplier for surveys, RAB, and then White House as well as the lot 2 supplier. So the 22 left undelivered and the 28 reserved properties, we decided to pick those all up and pass them on to RAB to complete the surveys. And then obviously White House would follow up with the install, kind of going through the process that Russ just alluded to. The project itself, though, was part funded by Granting Aid, the Environment Agents Granting Aid, and local levy. So we had pulled together a kind of outline business case to draw down some funding, which LCC matched 50% of. At the time of kind of that work and the outline business case, again, the grant funding was only £5,000. So as Gareth alluded to at the start, the £10,000 hasn't really been enough to deliver from a Build Back Better perspective. £5,000 has been able to deliver even less from a grant perspective. So because it was a granting aid scheme, it meant that we had to move a flood risk property flood risk band, which would mean a whole package of measures of PFR would need to be installed at a property, and which means the £5,000 of grant needed to be contributed by homeowners. And we found that a lot of property owners, obviously, that have had flooding impacts to them, a lot of their money has actually gone back onto kind of buying possessions and rebuilding their house and that sort of thing. So a lot of properties have dropped out of that phase 2A and 2B property flood resilience scheme, and we're now wrapping up that scheme with potentially only a further 5 properties that are going to make it to install. So that's potentially only going to be 11 out of 56 possible. And then kind of alongside that, as has been alluded to, we in Lincolnshire met the criteria for the flood recovery framework, which was announced post Babette and Henk in 2023. We had over 900 properties internally flooded in Lincolnshire, which were all eligible for the Death for Repair grant scheme. We took the approach in the first instance of allowing residents to express their interest, just so that we could get an understanding of the resource needed to deliver potentially 900. We had over 380 residents express interest. We then obviously followed up with a full application process in which we received 220 back that have been approved and kind of working their way through the process. As we already had contracts and working processes in place with RAB and White House through the EA framework, we went back and issued 2 new contracts to deliver the repair grant work to both of those as well. One thing that White House advised from the outset was because of the capacity across the Midlands, they only could deliver a certain number of properties out of the 220 that we were working with. So recently we've actually gone to the reserve supplier, as Russell alluded to in his presentation, with Apex Flood Solutions. So we're working with them to actually deliver, and they feel that we're kind of in a position to deliver against all of those 220, so which is good news for Lincolnshire, and we're kind of working through that process at the moment. The DEFRA grant has also allowed an opportunity for kind of retrospective applications as well. So we took the approach in Lincolnshire in that we would administer the grant and the works on residents' behalf. But we did find that many people that were eligible had actually come to us with works that had already been done by themselves. They'd already sourced their own surveys and installed works. And this was something that was eligible within the DEFRA grant. What we've done, working quite closely with Rab and Russell and his team, is we've allowed residents to apply retrospectively, and Rab have worked with us as part of the post-installation audit that has been taking place to actually determine the suitability and eligibility of works and measures, and actually assisting homeowners with the claim form process to enable us to approve and then administer the grant on submission to DEFRA. So we've developed a number of working processes for the DEFRA grant. And then more recently, again in January 25, Lincolnshire was quite badly affected with internal flooding. Nearly 200 properties flooded again in January, some of those being repeat offenders from Storm Babette and Henk, but quite a number were actually newly flooded properties as well. As a result, our authority has allocated £1 million of reserve funding to launch a repair grant scheme for those properties in January 25, which we've actually started to invite residents to apply this week. One of the kind of directives from our organisation was that they wanted this to be a very streamlined process, and allow homeowners to try and source contractors and do the work themselves, following kind of the processes that we've put in place for the retrospective approach for the DEFRA grant. So this grant will be specifically on building PFR measures rather than some of the recoverability measures that Gareth had alluded to at the start. We're again looking to work with RAB to assist with the post-installation audits and the grant claim processes for that. And then one final approach that we've taken in Lincolnshire was a community-based approach. So in October 2023, we delivered, in partnership with the Anglian Water and funding through Grant and Aid again at the Environment Agency, a surface water scheme, capital surface water scheme in Long Bennington. As part of our outline business case and the hydraulic modelling that was undertaken to complete the design and options for delivery, there was a number of properties within the village that would remain at higher risk given their location or sort of kind of external factors that wouldn't be fully addressed by our capital works. So we invited those residents to actually take up PFR as well to just improve their resilience as part of the wider scheme. At the time, this was when the first iteration of the framework was in place, so we actually did surveys through JBA at the time, who were Lot 1 suppliers on the first framework. And then as part of the contract with White House under the second framework, they were looking to deliver the installation works for us. So that again is work that is currently ongoing. Next slide, please, Paul. So yeah, just talking about some of the different routes of procurement. Obviously, I've mentioned that obviously we have utilised the EA framework that Russell was alluding to. As I said, the pilot project with Essex was actually a PSCA agreement because at the time it was something that we hadn't done, and Essex were up and running. The process was simple, obviously, from a procurement payment perspective, because everything went through Essex, but we had us at Lincolnshire had a lot less control over contractor works and engagement with residents as again we were going through Essex. So hence why we moved on to phase 1 and tried our own approach through a tender process. Obviously, a lot of lessons were learned in terms of trying to have one supplier deliver both survey and installations. We only actually had 2 bidders back from the procurement exercise that we did, and obviously the successful supplier did have challenges, and only partial delivery was enabled. The community approach, as mentioned, was utilised. The surveys were utilised through the previous EA framework, and then was part of the wider capital works. And then phase 2 and DEFRA has been utilising the EA framework and kind of going through the process that Russell alluded to in his presentation before. The LCC grant that is just been launched, it will be up to the responsibility of the homeowner to kind of source their own contractors, obviously with us providing advice and guidance, and then hopefully subject to award, RIB assisting with the post-installation side of things. Next slide, please. So yes, we have faced some challenges across numerous approaches. One, as I've alluded to, is actually the funding. All of our approaches have stuck with the £5,000 grant as a contribution, mainly because of the overlap of the schemes. As an authority, we've had to ensure fairness and consistency, so we couldn't be seen to launch new schemes that could potentially advantage over another scheme that is still delivering. So DEFRA, for example, is £5,000. Our LCC grant is still going to be £5,000, even though we've obviously learned some lessons already that £5,000 isn't enough. It only provides a minor contribution. So we've also fed this back in some of the national forums to DEFRA to say that there needs to be consideration in terms of future flood recovery framework announcements, because we've really struggled to, and many of our contractors that we've worked with have struggled working within those grant parameters as well. So we have noticed as part of the grant and aid funding that there has been changes to the what's called a PF calculator in recent months. So at the time of our phase 1 and 2 trials, which drew down grant and aid, it was kind of capped at £5,000. But there has been changes, I believe, to future schemes which can allow you to draw down more grant money based on properties risk. So that's something that we will consider as an authority in the future. Capacity is a big one. So as I mentioned, the phase 1 approach, we only received 2 tender bids back from contractor to actually try and deliver both survey and install, which is obviously something that we've learned that maybe the industry isn't quite set up in that way at the moment. And the EA framework has obviously allowed for a quicker route to market as a result of kind of the Bet and Henk DEFRA grant. But many authorities have actually accessed that framework as well, as Russell alluded to, especially in the Midlands. So the sheer number of properties that have been eligible for this grant has meant that contractors have struggled, and we've had to utilise reserve suppliers as well to try and meet that demand. Resource. It's been a significant amount of time and resource within our team to actually manage the numerous projects and contracts. The DEFRA grant has obviously taken a huge proportion of our time, given the sheer number of eligible properties and applications that we've received. Consideration needs to be given for funding for authorities to administer the grants as well, and that is obviously something that we've fed back to DEFRA as part of the feedback of this grant scheme. But we've acknowledged kind of the significant burden, not only from the PFR, but as a result of the workloads across the team. So obviously we've had to deliver Section 19 investigations, deliver our wider capital programme as well. So PFR is just one element of the day job, which as a result, our authority has actually increased our team by 4 in the last 18 months or so. So, but we are still only a team of 10 covering the whole county, with a number of different roles, and more and more properties being affected, unfortunately, as we see the kind of increase in storms and wet weather. The take up overall, we had a good take up for the DEFRA grant, but as I mentioned, we only had 220 out of a possible nearly 1,000 properties that could have applied. The pilot scheme, as I said, we saw only 3 out of the 14 go to install. 6 out of the 56 go to install of the phase 1, 2A, 2B. The Long Bennington scheme, although we had identified 10 properties that remained at risk following our scheme, we invited those 10, and we're actually only going to see 2 of those get measures installed. And the LCC grant is yet to be determined, but obviously we have funding for 200 properties if it's £5,000 a property. So there has been some early interest with our applications going out this week, which is good. So I think it is down to the £5,000 grant. That's been a big one. Homeowners not being in a position to contribute much beyond that. There's also been, and it's kind of been alluded to in the previous conversations, is there's still a perception that PFR highlights properties that being at risk or have flooded. So they're kind of worried about the saleability and the flagging with insurers. So yeah, there's a lot of education work still to be done, as has been alluded to previously. Partial measures. So as part of the DEFRA grant, it has been deemed appropriate for the DEFRA repair grant to be used partially, because not homeowners can't contribute above the £5,000. They can still utilise that grant to do some resilience work that will provide some resilience benefit. So we've been working quite closely with RAB in terms of determining ways that you kind of work from the ground up. So effectively, you'll look at the lowest point of a property until that £5,000 runs out. And then that's kind of the measures that's taken forward. But the survey report the homeowner receives, there is opportunity for them to contribute and deliver a full package of measures. And some homeowners have been taking that on where they have been able to, but others have just solely used the £5,000 of grant that's been available as part of DEFRA. So yeah, education is a big one. Many residents still don't understand PFR and its benefits. We have done a lot of work in Lincolnshire. We've started to actually include recommendations where applicable within our Section 19s for residents to actually consider PFR and signpost them to relevant guidance and information, because again, as it's kind of been alluded to, us as an authority can't always deliver a capital scheme. The funding just isn't there to deliver against all the properties that have been affected, and there are certain locations where a capital scheme just isn't feasible, and PFR is the best option. So working quite closely with like the NFF and our Resilience Forum to engage communities, promoting kind of emergency plans and flood action groups as well, which incorporates PFR and the role that can play within communities. So we've worked closely with partner authorities to hold engagement events as well. So where Flood Mary and the Flood Bus have kind of attended to help promote and raise awareness and kind of give some of that emphasis to homeowners to explore and take forward themselves. Yeah, next slide, please, Paul. So yeah, finally, successes. There have been a lot of successes. We are potentially going to see 400 properties in Lincolnshire have some form of PFR installed across the numerous schemes. So I think obviously the uptake hasn't been there in terms of properties that could take it up. 400 is still a significant number, and we're pleased with how the work has gone across some of the schemes, particularly DEFRA, and the potential that the new LCC scheme can bring as well. Working processes, so that the differing schemes have allowed for a number of processes to be trialed and obviously lessons to be learned. We've really established working relationships with RAB, White House, and now recently Apex as well. So they've enabled us to kind of refine the approaches with their expert experience and the roles that they play within the industry as well. So I think we in Lincolnshire have established quite a base to take PFR forward and refine the ways that we take it in the future, kind of when this round of schemes and grants come to an end. And provides the potential for a partnership approach for service delivery across both authorities and contractors as well. So it's a bit of a model for future working within Lincolnshire. Homeowner needs. So as I mentioned, DEFRA grant, we set out to deliver the prospective approach, so we would deliver it on our behalf, but it came apparent that a lot of residents had been quite proactive already, so we wanted to find a way to work with DEFRA and our contractors as well to actually be able to use the grant to fund work that had already been done by residents where applicable. So that has been quite positive as part of the DEFRA grant. Investment. So LCC has invested significant funding into bringing in additional staff, as I alluded to, and obviously taking further PFR grants forward this year. So it's providing significant funding to deliver across all of the projects, and the flood risk actually is at the top of the authority's agenda at the moment. So yeah, I think it leaves quite an opportunity to take PFR as a package as our capital flood risk programme going forward. And again, on the other hand, education has been done, as I kind of alluded to in the other slide. There is still work to be done. One thing that I didn't mention as well is that something that, and it kind of alludes back to Gareth's point around preparedness. We're actually working with our project Groundwater, which is a project funded by the Environment Agency as well within Lincolnshire, and as part of our team, working with them and emergency planning colleagues to look at installing data loggers to identify particularly groundwater, because it's part funded by the groundwater project, but all types of river, fluvial and surface water, to give that early warning to residents so that they're more prepared to actually take early action. So deploy their barriers, or get someone round to the property to deploy it for them if they're away, that sort of thing. So it's part of that preparedness to help with the early warning, and that's another trial that stems from some of our PFR work. Yeah, thanks, Paul. Next slide. So this is just a few examples, particularly of the DEFRA grant that we've installed more recently. The one in the bottom left corner there is actually one of the ones which was a retrospective application that came to us, and then some of the other ones are kind of work that have been delivered by White House and RAB as part of the EA framework contract. Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Paul. So yeah, that covers it for me. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity for kind of sharing with you guys. And if there are any questions that I can answer, please send them in.
Great, thank you, Ashley. I mean, I have to say part of my response, having listened to those two presentations on the bureaucracy involved, is amazed that anyone got any PFR at all. So well done, both of you, for your tenacity as much as anything else. Right, we've got quite a short amount of time, and Paul, I think you want to go through just the BeFloodReady thing at the end. So I've really got about 5 minutes of questions.
Don't worry about my slides. I think it's more important that we go for Q&A with all the speakers. So I will just leave that up there. If people want to scan that, they can get some information about how people can get involved with the BeFloodReady community of practice. And if they scan that, they can sign up to receive newsletter and be part of the community of practice.
Great. And then in terms of the Q&A, there's lots of questions here. I'll try and pick out a few. I'd also just encourage everyone to read them, because some of them are comments and they're very good, so I won't bother reading those out, but do go in and check them out. And also there's some quite interesting discussion in itself going on in the Q&A, because some of these questions are probably best answered by other people on the call. Sorry, I'm going up here to find some that resonated with me, and they came in, Russell, during your presentation, but they resonate, and I think they're a bit Ashley there as well. We got several comments and questions about whether or not 2/3 surveys was a waste of money. Though I should say in the question, some of the questions said, is 3 surveys for BBB a waste of money? BBB doesn't require multiple surveys, just one. Russell, do you want to answer that? Anyone else want to jump in?
Well, I guess that it depends. if you understand the history of PFR, so I'm old enough and grey enough to know where it came from, and I suppose in the early days, people with bright ideas about what PFR was and a product to sell would go to a property and say, here's something that's great, have it, and they'd install it, and they wouldn't really look at all the other risks and routes of ingress at that site. And so essentially that was one of the really big drivers for the code of practice to be developed. So the code of practice put in place a really common construction industry process where there is an independent survey done at the beginning. You do need to understand flood hazard. You do need to understand the sources, the pathways and the receptors. And then I guess it's for the whoever the client, whoever's paying the bill, as to what their process is for acquiring the money. So for public sector organisations, they can get that sort of work done relatively cheaply, and then get the approval for the bigger money to come in. And I think that also provides an opportunity for feedback to the homeowner at that stage, so you can refine what the possible is with the homeowners and start to have that conversation. So again, thinking about Gareth and his presentation, there was a lot there about when to have the appropriate conversation, and so actually it does aid that conversation, going through the process, learning something about the property, learning something about the homeowner, then going in, the contractor doing a detailed survey based on the property survey hazard assessment that we've done. And then again, I guess it's up to you whether you decide that a post-installation audit is required independently as well. But again, the history of PFR, certainly in the early days, it lacked those things, and there wasn't the assurance of what was being provided and installed. And so this really does give, the code of practice gives you a very reliable and robust solution to it. Gareth, yeah, you add to that.
Yeah, it's just on the repair and renew grant, Ashley. I mean, watertight, we actually don't do that because £5,000 includes VAT. So when you take the VAT back, it's 4,200. By the time you take out surveys, you're left with little more than enough maybe to fit one flood door. So it's, there's been plenty of talk about the suitability of the repair grant, but in our view, it doesn't leave people with enough money to do anything really worthwhile that's going to protect them.
Oh, sorry, let's go to your hand up. Right, we've got lots of questions here, all on quite a similar theme about the shortage of suppliers, and there's comments ranging from, is there any money in this for suppliers given the sort of cost implications? Ashley, your experience of finding suppliers, does anyone want to pick up on the kind of constraints in the supply chain? I mean, Vicky, you also mentioned this in terms of what you've done to sort of prepare your supply chain for it. Anyone want to pick on those questions about the healthy industry and that suppliers, pressure on suppliers?
Perhaps I can say something there on behalf, Gareth, if you'll agree with me, so on behalf of the International Property Flood Resilience Association. So just putting a different hat on for a while as a founding member, along with Gareth, of the new trade association. It has literally just come into being, and it's made up of the existing Environment Agency suppliers are all founding members of this organisation. So we're very much looking to expand the supply chain. We expect the supply chain to expand as PFR becomes mainstreamed, and indeed we're welcoming that. And really, we've set up the trade association so that we can be assured, and as I've kind of alluded to, the early days of PFR, you didn't always have very reputable organisations involved. The trade association will ensure that those organisations are reputable and certified and trained through the CIWEM certification scheme, and have got that due diligence that I referenced there all in place. so that both homeowners, risk management authorities, insurers, they all need that assurance that you're dealing with really good quality bona fide suppliers, and the trade association, I think, will help that.
Just to come on off the back of that, Russell, Ashley, you mentioned that you're going to be putting out to a number, people can choose their own contractors. You know, we would like to see it that those contractors would become part of IPFRA and would also undertake the CIWEM training, sort of to maintain the standards that we now have in the industry. And it's not quite as bad news as everybody thinks. You know, there has been a shortage of not only materials, products and installers, but FloodReady and the Environment Agency have funded a new test tank at Hull University. We have another accreditation body, CIWEM, who've come into the market. So the infrastructure that's required to build an industry is now in place, and over time, new installers will come on. You know, I was at the event yesterday at FloodReady in London, and there was representatives there from the British Damage Management Association there, the guys who represent all the restoration contractors. So they're now looking to see how they can get involved in PFR, and it's a very, very similar skill set.
Right, and we've got quite a few comments along this line as well in the chat, talking about the sort of need to think of this alongside the wider green agenda, and there's a lot bigger focus on decarbonisation. There's some specific questions that I'll leave to you, Paul, about access to the CIWEM training, which two questions I want to try and fit in, and that we haven't got any time left, so please be as quick as you can. One is for you, Ashley, but about the LA grant scheme. What is a good timeline for you to get it completed?
So I think this was something that we had, especially with the DEFRA grant, there was actually a time limit on it when it was first announced, and from the outset we kind of raised concerns with DEFRA in terms of delivery. I think originally when it was first announced we had just under 18 months. That has since changed, and the process from the DEFRA has changed. It is wholly dependent on the supply chain as well, to be honest. Obviously, we've had advice and guidance from White House and RAB throughout. Yeah, it's an open-ended question in terms of how many properties we're delivering against. I think just to give some context, our new LCC grant scheme that's been launched kind of this week, we're giving that 24 months to deliver, but obviously the emphasis on that one is for homeowners to source their own contractor, and that the role will be for us and our surveying contractor to assess work upon that. So we felt 200 properties in 24 months was realistic, and we're probably nearing that point with the DEFRA grant now. As I said, we've got 220, and I think with the extension from DEFRA in the form of we can claim grant up front, we're working on the basis that all of our 220 should be delivered by September of this year, and we were fully got up and running at the start of 24. So that's kind of where we're at the moment.
Russell, can you tell me what timelines it would be for the EA grant scheme?
An EA grant scheme from
start to finish.
From start to finish. It depends on the identification process the agency having at the beginning, but it's about 6 months, really, 6 to 9 months, depending on the number of properties within the scheme. Again, just on the supply chain sort of side of things, I would say that the last 12 months have been. We've never done nearly 1,000 surveys before in a year. It's been a really hectic year, and you will get those surge events. It's kind of in the title. It's flood or drought, isn't it? You know, so they do all tend to come at once, and I guess this is a case for those proactive schemes by the local authorities and the build better before approach. You know, which I think the insurance companies could. I think Gareth, you said it would take 250 years on a build back better approach to get through all the properties that are at risk. You know, so maybe there's something in build better before, so you can actually you can get better capacity by thinking about things before it happens.
Yeah, which is why we have risk management authorities.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're well over. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. There were some questions I was hoping to get to, which we haven't. though the chat is got lots of comments in there and the Q&A. So I just want to say a massive thanks to our panelists and for giving up their time and preparing some really interesting and very detailed presentations on 4 very different approaches. And thanks to everyone else who stayed with us through this sunny afternoon, and then finally to CIWEM for organising. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.